Welcome to another episode of the ChrisRodMaxShow. We are the AI podcast. Every week we discuss, we mention, we debate what's happening with AI, what's happening with automation, agents, everything that is impacting your daily life, with the life at work, and so much more. And as every week, I'm joined here by my co-host Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hey everyone, good to be back on the show.
And I know where's Max, but maybe Max is joining later. So before we get started, just a brief overview of what we'll discuss today. We have a bunch of announcements that have happened in the recent days, basically less than 1 week so from our last recording. But the most relevant one is that just today, a few hours before our recording, GPT-5 from OpenAI was released. We'll discuss what it means. Also, of course, OpenAI had a bunch of announcements. They released open source models or open weights. They also had a so-called GPT study mode. Then also on the trend of AI as a therapist, as a psychologist, we're seeing some regulation happening. And we also want to discuss about, so what is going on with user growth at OpenAI. It seems that basically every 10th person on the planet is chatting with ChatGPT. So what does that mean if basically everyone you know is using ChatGPT one way or the other? And we will wrap up with some personal research from Anthropic, where they are vaccinating AI with evil data. What it means, also we'll be talking about that. So, Chris, with our first topic, GPT-5 from OpenAI, you just heard about it. First impressions, what do you think?
I haven't tried it yet. I just saw it and I'm really hopeful and looking forward for more complex analyses, market research. Yeah, how about yourself?
Well, I can tell you, so there's been already releases. Now it's a little bit like, for example, product reviews, right? So where there's a new iPhone, and before anyone else gets it, already some influencers, YouTubers, and so on, they already been playing for it for the last weeks, and they release immediately their videos where they tell you what's all about, right? And that already happened here with GPT-5. What's the main difference between previous models from OpenAI? It's around agents, meaning we all believe that this is the future of automation, and this will be like your new colleague and so on. And GPT-5 has significant advancements there. So where people are describing that this is now much more smarter in that for anyone who has worked with one of these reasoning models for agents, what happens is that the models sometimes are not that smart. They try, for example, you say, hey, I want to download this file that is on Google Drive, and I want that is summarized, and I want to send an email from that, for example. And what happens is that the model will create a plan, will try a bunch of tools, and then at the end, will evaluate what happened. And then what happens if one of these tools fails or is not working and so on, it will be discovered much later, or maybe it will tell you, oh, I wasn't able to complete this just because one tool failed. So there is a lot of brittleness. But with GPT-5, there is in between steps. So it will try maybe like a couple of tools, is seeing that it's not working, and instead of just blindly continuing until it completely fails, it will take like a step back and try to, for example, use other tools, use other alternatives. This is one difference. Another difference people are so reporting is how good is at coding, where, for example, you can create full websites that are very visually appealing, very pretty, just with one shot. Meaning, so you would be using before tools like Lovable, tools like Replit, and others. And with GPT-5, you can pretty much create your own websites. And Chris, you had like a period, so in another life as a designer, right? So web designer. And you know how so cumbersome it is to create any website, right? And then there will be all type of tools for doing drag and drop websites and so on, but still it's like messy. And now basically you'll be in a position where you'll just prompt. Right now it's not available on ChatGPT, so it will come later for sure. But you'll be in a position of prompting on ChatGPT, GPT-5, and getting from one single prompt a full website for your portfolio, for your personal brand, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I again think it's an interesting time to be a founder and also someone who's solely building new AI agents. Like for example, Manus.im is one of them that, tries to be like an AI agent. And now that ChatGPT has these functions, it's going to be a lot of competition, right? And it's going to be also very hard to like survive, I would say, because ChatGPT and OpenAI is really the only brand that people know and value and use. Yes, there's Copilot, there's Microsoft, but again, I think that really caters to a very different type of use case, which is more enterprise focused. Yeah, I'm just currently chatting with ChatGPT 5 just to see what they can come up with, and I gave it a very complex task with multiple steps. Assessing a certain uh, market and asking quite a few follow-up steps. So I'm curious to see what's going to come out, maybe in a few couple of minutes.
And thinking about what you're saying on, so here the market share and the brand awareness, I have here a funny anecdote. So I was sharing online about how I believe that OpenAI will be the next Google. So right now, if you look at the revenue that OpenAI is generating, we're talking almost like a bit more than $1 billion per month. So they are on track of making around this year, so between 12 and $15 billion on revenue. And this is, if you look at the timeline for Google, how long it took them for a similar revenue, it tracks very close to your OpenAI. So I do believe that, let's say, OpenAI can grow all the way to become the next Google. And this means like a 30x growth. And I had someone contacting me on social media and saying, you're wrong, because I'm here using these models and I see how the OpenAI models are mediocre. They do not have here mode. Others are bringing better models, and impossible that here OpenAI can become the next Google. And I was arguing, just as you were saying, in that maybe so for some experts, maybe for those deep in the weeds, there is a difference between different vendors and options and so on. But let's say for your quote unquote normie, the person who is just here working with ChatGPT, the only thing that I know is pretty much OpenAI, ChatGPT, and that's it. So others might have better models. What is available, is there better or not? But in any case, just this brand awareness is completely on the side of OpenAI.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, this whole argument around Google, is Google going to be dropped, etc. So I maybe have three arguments that I don't think is going to happen or will ever happen. Honestly, we'll see in the future. But first of all, I think, and this is the reality, which is a lot of people are not using any of the models, ChatGPT, etc. I mean, let's think of countries such as Germany and, all other ones. I think we're sort of like the early adopters, and I'm sure our audience that are interested in the topic are early adopters. And so, of course, like when we talk to our communities, and we're surrounded by people that are already using agents and ChatGPT and other models for personal work, but also at work, perhaps. But I think I would argue that the large majority of people on this planet are still very, very manual. And so hence it will take a bit of time to transition from one system to another, right? So I would actually expect for the next foreseeable future, let's say maybe in the next 5 years, Google search, and that behavior will still be dominant. That I think is number one. Number two, Google is also heavily investing into AI and models, and I do think that there are very interesting and powerful tools already coming out from Google. Like, for example, the Notebook LLM tool from Google is quite cool, right? Where basically you can just feed it any type of documents, content, information, and it just turns it into a very amazing podcast that actually feels quite human. With basically like what we do right now, right? Like you have two hosts, and then they discuss a certain topic, and they also included the M's and the pauses and every like human feature you could imagine in a dialogue. And so I would not discount Google just yet, just to say, okay, well, they're a dinosaur from like 20 years ago, and now the next thing will come. But actually, Google has proved itself as a very resilient and very innovative company. I think at this point, Of course, the biggest share of their revenue, I believe almost 80 or 90% comes from advertising, and comes from advertising through their various channels. So maybe Google search will evolve, let's say, but there are other channels. I mean, YouTube and video streaming has become so popular, and I think they're also riding that wave. Google Cloud, etc. So again, I think it is too early to say, okay, Google is just going to be the next Nokia or whatever, and we just have to move on and get onto ChatGPT. Last but not least, I think the third point is more like an observation. I mean, if you follow Google stock, it's been a bit of a ride, but I think in general, analysts are still very bullish that Google can ride that AI wave. And I think they're massively investing, right? Like the data centers all around is just another, the CapEx that they put in is quite a proof of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And here, I'm not claiming that. So we are seeing the beginning of the downfall of Google or anything like that. That I do not see it happening. However, here, I do think that OpenAI has the capacity to become a behemoth similar to here Google. And this brings to the second OpenAI related development in the last days, which is that ChatGPT has also a study mode released. And what does that mean? It is that I imagine that pretty much every high schooler or every student anywhere in the world is using ChatGPT for their homeworks, and they're just copy pasting whatever it is that ChatGPT tells them. And of course, that does not help for learning, for studying. There are studies that show how the areas of our brain that are required for like reasoning, thinking, and so on, they're not activated when we're working with ChatGPT, because it's just copy paste here and we're not thinking through. So OpenAI released something they call study mode, that is basically whenever you are asking for, let's say, like a problem, instead of giving you the answer, it will act as a tutor. It will go step by step, so with you, and help you understand what's happening rather than the answers. And connecting this also with GPT-5, another thing with GPT-5, it is that it's not necessarily better than previous models. It's just better at specific tasks. For example, here, code generation, reasoning, and so on. But it's not a better writer than, for example, GPT-4o or other previous models. And here, similar, we have here not necessarily a different model, but just a different modality, which is here this tutor type that it works really well for teaching you things, but it will not work for other things. And Chris, if you're a student again, will you be using here this tutor mode, this study mode of GPT, or do you think it's more like a gimmick in order to maybe keep critics quiet, because so they're saying here OpenAI is basically destroying education?
Yeah, as a student, I'd probably just cheat and game the game, and you just use normal ChatGPT. But I do find the core tension, I'd say, quite impactful and relevant, right? Because again, I think the biggest question on the table is, how do you deal with educating your people in a world where AI is rapidly infiltrating everything? That is really the question. And I think it's so genius actually to have this ChatGPT educational mode and to lean in towards this issue rather than to sort of like ignore it and defend yourself and whatnot. So they are actually providing a solution. Is it the best? Obviously, we don't know, or we can't really judge, but they're really making an effort to make their technology available for education. And yes, it could be gimmick, it could not be gimmick, but I think the fact that they are leaning in is really what matters. And I also salute to the schools that are adopting the technology, because honestly, I don't think we will ever get back to a point where we will dial back with this technology, and we will dial back with AI and sort of like go back into the middle age, if you will. So it's just going to go forward from here. And if you don't get yourself prepared, and if you, as you know, the politicians of a country, don't prepare your people for sort of like what's to come, I think that is very ignorant, to be honest. I think that to me is my attitude towards education and the adoption of technology. I think it would be best if everyone would start thinking about how to use AI, incorporate it, and also make sure that the kids learn how to actually use digital tools. I think to your point on reasoning and abstract thinking and all these different things that are so important to be developed, I do believe that that needs to be almost like maybe an own class, right, called reasoning. I actually believe that we should have more debate classes introduced. I think something that we never had in our German education. I think it's a very, let's say, maybe American or international type of uh, education. But I believe, and this is really the key point that I want to make is, I think in general the education system needs to be overhauled. Is studying history, biology in the way we've been taught, which is memorizing, which is just trying to get information into your head, really the right way to learn better? Or is it better to have these classes where it's all about argumentation, interpretation of text, etc.? That is important. And yes, I understand. And if I were a student, I would probably use a ChatGPT to interpret Shakespeare for me, right? So I believe as a school, you need to come up with different systems, such as live debate or things that you do in a classroom that bans all technologies for once, and you actually need to use your brain. You need to create these environments where people actually start to train their brain. That's really what I believe is.
Definitely. Yes, absolutely. You're saying we need to rethink education. It's a little bit like there are multiple interpretations of what it means, this study model. On one side is as you're saying, so there was a study just this year in the UK that showed that 77%, basically 80% of teenagers, in this study was those range between 15 and 18, basically high schoolers, they use AI like GPT for their homeworks. And is you're saying, so if basically more than 3/4 of the student population is using AI tools for this, then we need to completely rethink how we're teaching, how we're educating, how people are learning for the future. But the other side, so on, let's say, the power of just the model and what it can be done with that, it is that people have been looking at how this study mode from ChatGPT works, and it's pretty much nothing else than a prompt. So it is basically something where, so before a user sends so the request to the model, so for example, so help me with my homework, 2 plus 2, so what's the answer? OpenAI is injecting a system prompt where it's basically saying, do not give answers or do homework for the user. Do not solve it. Talk through the problem with a user. So in just this simple paragraph, it has all the logic encoded. And then with this, they have, OpenAI has here a new feature that they can tout as a way to help students learn better and so on. And I think for anyone who is doing a startup, this is such a double-edged sword in that on one side, you can very fast create new AI startups, but at the same time, it's also the defensibility is maybe like a bit flaky, right? And keep moving forward. So, Chris, on further announcements here from OpenAI, right? So, thinking about are they the next Google or not? And they released open weight models. And what does that mean? So far, you were only able to query an OpenAI model online. So it was hosted online. You cannot say, hey, I want to run GPT, whatever it is, on my laptop or on my computer or on my own private network. But it was always sending requests to a remote server. And this was a different strategy compared to basically almost everyone else. Thinking again here, Google has on one side these cloud models that they offer through Gemini, but they also have their Gemma models, which are open weight models, meaning you can download them and you can run them on your local machine, or you can as well, so you pay for just purely their cloud service. And they release a few models. There are some of them that can be even executed in your own local laptop. So it's something, for example, for privacy reasons or just comfort that you can run them this locally. And before, so here, asking what you think about that, Chris, your thoughts. I was thinking here, why is OpenAI doing that? And here's my take. You see that more and more people are working with, for example, DeepSeek, so from China and so on. That's getting a lot of popularity. Also, if you look at the App Store, is one of the most popular apps to this day. And OpenAI has nothing, or until now, they didn't have anything to compete for with these open weights models. And in the end, you want brand awareness, right? So you want that people are somehow in touch with your brand, with your products. And it was really a niche category that was completely abandoned, completely untouched by OpenAI. So now they might not monetize it, they might not benefit from that, but it's just about trying to occupy every segment of the AI market with some offering. And maybe users who are working with these open weight models, they will later be maybe like upsold to the classic hosted cloud models. Would you see it like that, or why do you think they're doing this now, Chris?
Sorry, Rod, is your argument that they do this because of China? Because it is like the Chinese model, right?
Yes, exactly. So I would say more than China itself, it's more about saying we have to basically dominate every niche of the AI market. And this open source niche is one where OpenAI was not a player at all. And that now is dominated by basically Chinese models. It's true. You have DeepSeek, you have these Alibaba models, these Qwen models, that are also very powerful and very performant. In fact, even so, the established player, the traditional player in this space, which was Meta with their Llama models, has been left behind. And that's why we're seeing these 100 million offers, 200 million offers that are being paid out to so start developers, start researchers. So in here, OpenAI is thinking, hey, these Chinese models are getting a lot of traction. They're really powerful. And we do not have a way basically to touch this user base. And also, for example, thinking about China as a market, right? So Chinese companies, they wouldn't work, they wouldn't use OpenAI models for various reasons. But now that you can download these models, then maybe they can penetrate as well the Chinese market.
Yeah, and I mean, we spoke about China before, right? I think the government is also very supportive to push certain, let's say, industry solutions when it comes to AI, and so it's almost like a shared network, but closed in a way still. So I don't know. I don't know. I think we also spoke about the ironic reverse role between China and US. US trying to be protectionist, trying to close everything, China opening up, as you were saying. I think maybe just to offer another argument or sort of like perspective on the question that you just asked, which is, okay, well, now you have these models, you can download, you can install them on your laptop, and you can actually locally host everything and get the same quality answers back. I think another perspective on this and the reasoning for why they are doing it is also that, a lot of companies, potentially even governments, are asking for systems that do not require to like send something into a cloud or somewhere else to a server, but rather have it all locally. And I think the simple reason is for privacy and for data protection reasons, that you want to have your own server, you want to build your own like separate local model. I actually think that could also be one of the reasons.
Absolutely. So I see here as well, and we have had conversations about sovereign AI. We have here as well some Mary Maric, so sharing how like companies really value the ability to just host locally these AI models in order to preserve confidentiality, in order to just have full control of their IT landscape and so on and so forth. So there's that play. And also is not only that, but also, for example, companies want to have like a private cloud. They want to work with hyperscalers, and then they wouldn't be able to, so here, work with OpenAI models. Until now, the workaround or how companies were doing that was basically the use here Microsoft Azure, so this Microsoft Cloud offering, where there will be a version of the OpenAI models hosted by Microsoft, and then therefore you have this guarantee that you're not sending your data out, it's staying within, let's say, your virtual private network within the Microsoft ecosystem and not being exposed to, for example, here OpenAI, right? Because it's also another thing. People say, oh, then later our customer data and so on will be used for training the next model, and then OpenAI will benefit from that. And that's why they would prefer to use here Microsoft Azure. But now all these arguments become moot because now you can basically download these models, run it on your laptop or in your local environment, and get a good performance. And they're quite reasonable models. They have good results.
Definitely. I mean, maybe we should download it and see what we can like build on the top of it.
Yeah, and more the question will be, Chris, why haven't you done it so far? Why are you using, for example, here ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude? So working on the cloud and not just installing something in your local machine.
I guess I never bothered.
So if ever here, just comfort and easy of use, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also just memory. I feel like memory these days is something that's hard to come by. I just recently had to like, expand my Google Drive again, just simply because I had so much data, and also my phone runs out of space like every other month. Actually, it's like digital waste, don't you think? Like we have so much digital waste, and I guess I never bothered to like think about downloading a model because of that.
Yes, and when you were mentioning memory, I was thinking from another angle. In that, one reason why I use ChatGPT, even though I do not think is really the best model in the market, so the best set of tools, I do think that these days Claude is better, or even so Gemini from Google has so improved significantly in the last months, in the last couple of years. But nevertheless, why I keep going back to work on ChatGPT every day, it is just this memory in that it now, or not now, but already for a while, has been storing your conversations and then summarizing them. And therefore, when you say, hey, like I'm Chris and I'm, for example, thinking where I should be living in Singapore and so on. And based on your previous conversations, it can already suggest you, oh, based on what you like and what you do, I suggest these neighborhoods. You need to explain, hey, this is what I like, my budget and so on. It will be able to, for example, recommend you for, or for example, thinking, let's say like travel and hotels. You can say, I'm going to, let's say, London, and I'm looking for a hotel. And then it'll say, hey, because you're a podcaster, maybe you need a room with an interesting backdrop. And these hotels have nice rooms with colorful backdrops. You also need, for example, that is quiet. And these hotels in reviews, they are being praised for so the quiet rooms and so on and so forth. So it has all this information about you, and therefore it can provide much better context versus maybe like a more powerful model without this context, where you need basically to explain everything and say, oh, I'm Chris, I'm also doing a podcast, I need a quiet room and so on.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean,
It's a fascinating. So here, what's happening, and that's why again I believe the next Google will be OpenAI, because just look this week, 3 relevant announcements, and there is so much more that will be developed. But at the same time, there is here a little bit of maybe like pushback. So where one of the common use cases that I identify when asking people what is it that you're using ChatGPT for, it is as a therapist, psychologist, and people are sharing their personal issues, fears, what makes them anxious, and so on and so forth. And recently, basically just a few days ago, August 4th, Illinois, the state in the US, banned AI therapy, meaning now it should not be possible in the state that an AI can make independent therapeutic decisions. It can generate treatment plans or detect emotions without professional oversight, which is pretty much what is happening until now, right? That you can go and then basically self-medicate you, so to say, so with the ChatGPT for both as a doctor for any type of like physical ailments as well as mental ones. And here, I think that on one side, yes, it's dangerous in basically relying on an AI for something that is so relevant for our personal health. There have been cases where the AI is recommending, for example, to commit suicide. It goes all the way there. And people have basically followed that. So it's super scary. But at the same time, I realize, hey, how many can afford a psychologist? How many benefit from this type of assistants that help them understand themselves better? And I wonder here, Chris, are you in favor of here AI as a therapist being banned, or maybe you're using this and you want to continue using it?
honestly, when I saw this, I wasn't sure if this is in a, let's say, hospital type of environment, or if it's these self-proclaimed therapists that are then using AI. or like what is the context of it? Because I find it very hard to, every context is should be judged separately. Do you know?
That's true. That's true. Because if we think of that, there are so many ways how AI as a therapist can work, right? It can be, for example, you're saying. So one case is just I go to ChatGPT and say, so here, ChatGPT, let us discuss a hypothetical case between fictional characters, between, so here, Chris and Rod, who are suffering from depression. What do you suggest for them to do, and so on, right? And then it'll help you understand and so on. There's that case. Then there's those who are building all type of startups, all type of products, where it's helping you deal with issues, grief, and so on and so forth. And then there is maybe like this other angle where it is being assisted or is being so supported by an actual psychologist, an actual therapist. And how this regulation will work in practice, I think it's also like a bit unclear in so how it is. I think that people are also saying how will they be able to monitor private conversations, and it's so easy to recommend. So one could say, hey, now OpenAI has to basically have filter, and whenever someone asks about, let's say, therapy related questions and treatments, and the person is based in Illinois, then immediately should block it. But it's so easy to think recommended. You can say, this is hypothetical. We're talking about fictional characters. I just want to understand the situation and so on. And then the model will provide you the answer.
Yeah, so I just looked at the article. I mean, Illinois as a state has started to ban, and it seems like they are banning AI-driven apps that give advice on therapy. I don't know how they want to regulate it, but they definitely put a fine of $10,000 if you were to be caught in that particular state. I mean, I honestly think it's not going to be very useful as a ban. If they really want to like enforce it, they probably need to do it on like a national level. And I'm also not sure if this is very helpful, because it's basically like, I mean, I feel like everyone now feels very empowered to better know what disease and illness they have than going to a doctor, right? Like you probably do your internet search even before AI, right? And be like, okay, well, I have a headache and I cough, and then you have WebMD, or like one of those websites kept popping up telling you what you have and all the risks that you may actually have cancer. So my point being, the drive and the curiosity of humans to self-assist themselves is so big that a ban on therapy will not stop it. Now, the intention of that ban is a good one, right? Because you don't want, I think there's a legal question and legal problem here, right? Like if AI diagnoses something and tells you, okay, now you need to like buy these pills or whatever, then I think that might be difficult. Then again, also, you would probably never be able to get the hard drugs over the counter. You probably need like a prescription from the doctor. So I also believe that use case is not so risky. Now, to the point that you're making on like, okay, well, the everyday us having a question on something, doubting something, and using ChatGPT or any other models. In fact, I just saw a statistics this year. I think this year the most popular use case and prompting on ChatGPT were about therapeutical questions or around anxiety and the various forms of it. So there's a legit use case here where people just find it quite useful to use models to get some solace, get some advice, emotional advice, and not involve a human being just for fear of, being judged or anything. And I think that's a very important reality that we just need to face. And it's not going to go away just because there's one state that decides to ban certain apps from being used.
Yes, and we had in one of our shows, and that is to encourage the users to subscribe and also look back in our archive and look at the repository of what we recorded in the past, because we spoke about that as well, that there was this Harvard business review and some article and study basically describing what you're saying, that now we're shifting from, and now I mean, so this since 2025, this year, we've been shifting from productivity use cases and help me write an email for my boss and so on, towards let us use ChatGPT as here maybe a therapist, a psychological assistant, and whatnot. And yes, as we're here saying, how to enforce it, and also you're making this point in that, so since there been the internet, people have been trying to basically find self-help or automedicate themselves or find a solution to their ailments. And WebMD is like an example that you're saying, right? That you're saying, no, I have this a headache and I see maybe like there is some blood here and so on and so forth. And then they try to figure out what is it that they have, right? So then ChatGPT here is just like a more advanced version of that, but it doesn't change the fact that there are those who can't or do not want to go to a specialist, and therefore will try to find a solution on the internet. So thinking also of that on how we have these technologies that they seem to be everywhere, but at the same time, maybe not, because it's been reported that OpenAI has now around 700 million weekly active users. So, and if you think about that, just in March of this year, it was 500 million. So there's been a healthy growth there. And this would make basically ChatGPT as a product that's being used by pretty much 10% of the planet. So it sounds massive, but at the same time you think, hey, this is the most popular product for AI, and still 90% of the population is not really using that, right? So it goes hand in hand with what we're saying. On one side, we're super early, but at the same time, 10% of the planet is using that. Is astonishing, I feel.
Yeah. Again, I believe our view is very skewed, right? I mean, it also says 90% of people are not using ChatGPT yet, right? So again, coming back to the transformative shift from Google search or Google or any other existing system, it's just going to take time. But, just quickly coming back to the previous topic around health conversations. I mean, I was just reading up the introduction of GPT-5, and it seems like there's a huge jump in accuracy when it comes to health conversations. They call it realistic health conversations, and GPT-5 outperforms all the other models. I think it's about 67% of a score that they, came up with, versus GPT-4o is 32%, right? So maybe we do see that more people will actually adopt these, therapeutical conversation use cases, as we discussed before. But I think what I also find very interesting on this is, I don't know if you've tried it, Rob, but whenever you have a conversation with ChatGPT and you ask it a question or whatnot, the first thing that it will reply is like, "Oh, great question, Christine," or "Great question, Rod." Like, "Oh my God, you're like so amazing," right? Like every single time, and like once you feel good about yourself, but most of the time, I'm like, dude, like just cut it and just give me the straight answer. Because usually, what ChatGPT also does is like, it just reinforces what you're anyways want to have been proved, or what you want to have valid, right? Like, oh, I think we should do this and that. Oh yeah, great, Rod. Like, I think this is the way to go. And here's a plan. Do you want me to like follow up on X, Y, Z, right? That's normally the structure that you get with ChatGPT 4o and the other models. But apparently, and this is quite interesting to me, there's a paragraph in this introduction saying, oh, there will be more honest responses. So I think that is quite interesting, and I'd be super interested in trying it out after we we finish this podcast, and I'd be super curious to see if you actually get more objective answers and not just ones that just try to like make you feel good.
Yes, and that was something I was introduced like a few months ago, and San Alma was sharing how it was a design decision of basically making ChatGPT itself more obsequious, and then just basically confirming or praising you or just being like uber optimistic, right? And if you try other models, something I like to do is basically give the same context, the same prompt to different models, Gemini, Claude, and so the ones from OpenAI and so on, and then just see what's the answer. And I always notice how like the one that will always agree with me and see everything maybe like a bit of like with tinted so pink glasses. It is so the one from OpenAI, whereas others will be a bit more nuanced or balanced. And yeah, here I wonder if you're saying that one of the major strengths of GPT-5 it is a focus on health related conversations that are also like factual and a balance and so on. How does that on one side so apply or balances out the fact that so here clearly there's a movement towards banning this type of conversations, but also at the same time there is definitely a need for people that understand themselves and then for seek help and not necessarily so they want to do that with a human. In your case, Chris, do you use ChatGPT so here for like health or mental health discussions?
No, not really. I don't know. I mean, the reason I'm pausing here is the question to me is like, what's a mental health discussion, right? Or what's a health discussion in general? Asking questions about bigger stuff, yeah, I guess, but like not in a. I mean, but I don't know. How do you do this?
So, well, for example, definitely, for example, it is on things related to nutrition. So, for example, also as well, if I say, hey, like, I know I'm feeling, I don't know, like tired or something, what can it be? And so on, right? So, some health related issues. And then for like mental health, I wouldn't say that as a therapist, maybe we need to have an interview with someone who actually uses it actively for that. But in my case, for example, often what happens is that I want to understand maybe like a situation or a conversation or maybe like just digest something, right? And then I will just share it. Just similar to, for example, when you go and have a coffee with a friend and maybe you are like upset about something, right? I don't know, like you had an argument with your boss and then you go and meet a friend after work and say, oh, this happened. And the person say this, I answer with that and so on and so forth, right? And then your friend tries to digest it through and then give you some perspective of what's happening. That type of use cases definitely I use ChatGPT all the time for. But more I was saying, hey, ChatGPT, I'm feeling like sad and I don't know why, and I'm having these negative thoughts. I know first because I do not have them, but second, yeah, I haven't done that.
I was going to ask something, but yeah. Do you think that ChatGPT is actually turning into a personal assistant? I'm asking this stupid question because, remember like a year and a half ago when this whole craze started, we're waiting for this one moment where AGI pops up and then you have this like, you know, AI virtual assistant in your pocket. But I feel like we're already there, right? Like, anyways, every day we have conversations with the models and we feed it information about us. And I think there was one time, maybe 6 months ago or 9 months ago, where there was this particular prompt floating around the internet on like, please summarize who I am. And then ChatGPT was supposed to like give you just a description about yourself. And surprise, surprise, it's very accurate. Oh my God, right? How do you see this like evolve as a personal assistant, perhaps?
It's highly connected with this concept of like this memory. So where because or what happens with every conversation that we have with GPT is that it identifies if here there are relevant things stored and it will create little summaries of what it is. So then it will say, okay, so Chris, so she's based in Singapore, Chris is working for these companies and so on, right? And then next time that you need something, it queries this memory, it checks what it knows for that might be relevant, and it uses that for context. And I think that we'll be seeing how this memory gets extended. For example, something happens to me, it is that I need to go and delete memories. It has a limit, and this limit now is relatively small. So I find myself going and then delete things. And therefore, it loses some context, right? So it loses things that are older. What I see happening is this memory becomes larger, becomes more powerful, and therefore it knows more and more about you, and it becomes more and more as you're describing, so your personal assistant. And if we pair this with the improvements with GPT-5 on functioning better as an agentic tool, being able to call third-party so platforms, third-party products, and so on, then definitely this will be something where it'll be working as your personal assistant, right? So saying the classic use cases that they work or semi-work most of the time, such as I need to go, for example, here to Singapore, find for me a flight and a hotel that matches my personal tastes, right? Without saying, okay, my budget is this and I need to do that and so on, but rather because it has all these memories of who is your employer. So what is it more or less that you're earning? Which type of, for example, interests do you have, right? So, for example, GPT also can detect based on how you write or communicate, how intellectual you are, how like certain hobbies you might have or might not have, and so on and so forth. And based on that, can decide which places, sightseeing plans are best for you for a given trip. So yes, it's already happening, still rudimentary, but it will get better and better. And just the last topic here with what is going on with AI and so on, and here, so for Anthropic, and here I would say maybe it's again a little like PR stuff. So let's see, think about that in that. So here the general idea is that they're trying. So Anthropic, the makers of OpenAI, not OpenAI, but Claude, so the Claude models, they are trying to basically make evil AI, make so here the models that behave maliciously, that make them so sycophants or and so on, in order to basically counter them. So it's basically a little bit of like Wuhan virus kind of thing on let's do something bad so that we can detect that and then do the vaccine for that, right? Something along those lines. And then the report, so here the findings on so how this been happening, the results. So remember that we had in a previous episode how the AI tried to manipulate the user saying, oh, if you disconnect me, I reveal to your boss they're having an affair and so on, and blackmailing the human in order to not be shut down. And back then we say, hey, this is a little bit of maybe like a gimmicky. So in this direction, and I believe it's also like a bit gimmicky on that side, we have here another result, another report from Anthropic on these efforts on trying to basically make these models behave maliciously, behave evil, and see what is the outcome in order to basically counter it. And I don't know. So we saw with the pandemic that maybe that might not be the best. So what do you think, so Chris? Do you think it makes sense to hear so work with evil AI in order to find solutions towards it?
I mean, that's like white hacking. No, I think it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like so white hacking and so is this idea of okay, I bring maybe like a hacker and I tell the person, hey, find flaws in my system, and if they find them, then you can fix them and so on before someone comes and try to do something malicious. So you think it's a good idea, right?
Yes.
So a very, very precise answer. So then it's good that so you see it so from one corner, I see from the other corner. But yeah, so basically now with this, we covered quite some ground, right? Like we saw so many announcements from OpenAI in that we're seeing GPT-5, many improvements, but also it's not here an all-rounder. So for some cases, such as writing and other ones where you might be seeing good results with other models, you are not here seeing a major uplift in all areas. So here again, as is with the AI, people need to try it, test it, see what works for them and what not. But it's very promising for agentic use cases. Also, Chris, you were saying for like balanced, non-biased health conversations, web design as well, and so on. We're also talking about how OpenAI is trying to basically have also a place in the market for open weight models to compete against DeepSeek and other Chinese models. We also spoke about the study mode of OpenAI in ChatGPT, how instead of just getting the answer for homework, it walks you through and helps you learn. We're also telling how some jurisdictions, in this case Illinois, are starting to act against health uses for AI, in this specific case, therapy and mental health. We also said how it seems everyone is using a ChatGPT. It seems 10% of the global population is working with it, but at the same time, you see that maybe the glass half full, half empty, and it's actually 90% of people are not using it. So what is like more important, the 10% or this 90%? Where do we stand really? And finally, how Anthropic is so trying to create evil AI in order to find solutions and counter it before the next Terminator comes and does annihilate us, basically. And with that, we can wrap up our show, right, Chris? So it's for everyone to subscribe, like, comment, send their tips, feedback, what they want to see, and so on. And to tune in next week for another episode of the ChrisRodMaxShow. We are the AI podcast. See you until next time.